So I recently applied for a job, and during the application process, it asked me a question that I actually thought was a pretty good question. It wasn't one of those, you know, really annoying. Tell us about a time when you encountered a struggle and how did you work? Like this was a real question that like a normal person would want to know about another normal person applying for a job, and it was a job for a product related it was an application for a product related job, and the question was, briefly describe what you think is important to the process of creating excellent software products. So that's a fun question because it's not like frustratingly vague. It's open-ended, which is nice because you can kind of go in a lot of different directions with it, but it's a real question. It doesn't require you to, dig deep into the memory banks. I've realized during this recent job hunting expedition I've been on, the next time I'm at work and I encounter a problem that requires problem solving skills that I need to overcome, I'm going to document the entire process and I'm going to save it in a Word doc. And I'm going to use that in the future whenever I come across that stupid question. But this question is not like that. I like this question and I enjoyed answering it. And I want to kind of share my thoughts on this question. I don't talk about product management a lot because I don't really fancy myself as being such an expert that, anybody cares what I have to say on the topic. But I don't know, something about this question just made me think I want to talk this one out loud. And so that's what I'm going to do. And I also sort of answered this question on Twitter a few days ago in response to, I think it was a Product Talk, WP Product Talk, the podcast. It was either that or Katie, her personal Twitter. One of the two. Katie is one of the hosts of that podcast. But anyways, they asked some question, and my answer to that question is very similar to the way I answered this question in this application. So, what do I think is important to the process of creating excellent software products? Well, there's obviously a lot of things that go into the production of an excellent software product. So there's a lot of different answers to this question. There isn't just one thing that is important. There's a lot of things that are important. But when you read a question like this, usually if you've been in product management, and something comes to mind right away. One of all those many things, one of those things usually comes to mind and sticks out. And that kind of gives you an idea of what you're sort of, I'm going to say, passionate about when it comes to product management. And for me, I've talked about this before. There's the concept of adding new features to a product versus like maintaining the product. And there's always a balance. That as a product owner, you're always trying to balance those two things, because you can't do all the things all at once. Every second your developer is coding something, they're either adding a new feature to your product or they're maintaining the product in some way. They can't do both. So you, as a product owner, have to prioritize this, come up with a plan, come up with a roadmap, etc. And me personally, and I feel like I kind of am going against the grain with this a little bit, and that's just based on my experience, which is fairly anecdotal, and reading things that people are saying on LinkedIn and a little bit of Twitter, but mostly LinkedIn. I tend to believe that maintenance is actually more important than new features. And there's I'm sure folks could debate this back and forth. But generally speaking, at least in terms of, direct immediate results, if you are trying to drive new sales, then you need to add new features, right? If you're trying to increase the number of new sales that you're getting, you need to entice people somehow. There has to be some reason to buy the product that didn't exist, a month ago. Otherwise, you're just going to see the same sales, assuming the same, marketing and all that. And then maintenance of the product typically affects your renewal rate. So if your product is a solid product and there's not a lot of bugs, um, you're going to have a higher renewal rate. If your product is kind of sloppy and there's lots of bugs or very quirky, your renewal rates aren't going to be that high. People are going to buy it because they bought into your marketing. Then they're going to use it and they're going to go, I don't like this very much. It's, it's too much of a hassle dealing with the bugs and the workarounds required to make it work. So not as many people are going to put up with it. Right. So given the choice, if I was the product manager right now for a software that had, it was a recurring subscription type software, I would much rather grow a product slowly with a high renewal rate than grow a product quickly with a low renewal rate. And I know that a lot of people hear that and they think, why would anybody want to grow a product slowly? And well, the answer to that is, if you could grow quickly and maintain a high renewal rate, great. Show me someone who's doing that though. Because it's difficult. It's very difficult to pull that off. Because growing requires new sales. New sales requires new features. Working on new features means neglecting maintenance. Neglecting maintenance means, less happy customers. So here's the thing. If you continue down that line of thinking that I just mentioned, I sort of stopped conveniently at unhappy customers and low renewal rates. But guess what? When you have unhappy customers and low renewal rates, guess what else you get? You get bad reviews, you get a bad reputation, and guess what that negatively impacts? New sales, right? If you have a bad reputation, you can add more features to your face turns blue, but you're not going to get those new sales because they don't have confidence in your product. They read reviews that weren't good. They talked to people who said, it sounded good at first, but then I encountered this, and that, and it just wasn't worth it. You also run the risk of, companies do this all the time where they grow too quickly. Something changes in the market and now they have to lay off a bunch of people. I don't want to ever be in that position. I like the idea of growing, hiring, providing more jobs, but I don't like the idea of providing a bunch of jobs just to have to take those jobs away. I'd much rather have a solid product that I don't have to worry as much about. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do. Something happens in the market that you can't control and that negatively impacts you as a company. And there's nothing you could have done to predict it or prevent it. There might not even be anything you can do in response to it. That just happens in business. It happens. But another thing that happens is sometimes things happen that you could have been more prepared for. You could have seen it coming. You could have prevented or at least alleviated the problem, and you can respond to it. And sometimes that's the case where you could have done that, but you didn't, or you couldn't because you made this decision and that decision, and then it sort of handcuffed you and you just weren't able to be prepared in the way that you should have. And I think, growing slowly and carefully but maintaining a very happy customer base, very high renewal rate, I believe is just the best way to grow a product. I think that will protect you as a business more against, outside occurrences that are beyond your control. And I think it will actually also just be better for you in the long run. If you're making sales, you're making sales. You technically don't need to add new features if you're already making sales. You have revenue coming in, new revenue coming in, and you're keeping that monthly or annual revenue because your product is good, your customers are happy, and your renewal rates are nice and high. That's a sustainable business. That's a predictable business. Predictability is very sought after in business. It's not always attainable. It's the scary part of a business. Typically speaking, if you have a job that's pretty predictable, you know how much money you're getting paid every hour or every year, whatever, you know what to expect when you go to work, you know roughly how many hours you expect you have to work. With business, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so any amount of predictability in business is, it's just a relief. It's a breath of fresh air. And if you're just pumping out new feature, and your marketing is all, look at this new feature, look at this new feature, look at this new feature. And you're getting, your sales are going up and up and up. And you're thinking, yes, things are going so great. And then at some point, there just aren't more features that you can add. Just be honest with yourself. At some point, you get to a point where your product has every feature that anybody could have dreamed of, every random ass feature that some person requested on Twitter. You've added it to your product. And now you're sitting around going, now what? And you've made predictions and people are expecting this and that. And sales have plateaued. And you spent years neglecting your plugin. And now you have old code that is not meeting proper, best practices anymore. There are new standards and new APIs and things that you just can't take advantage of and integrate with because your code base is so old. Your code has turned into spaghetti code over the years because you focus so much on new features and didn't focus on maintainability, scalability. Maybe you made some acquisitions along the way and integrated some third-party things that weren't coded the way you would have coded it had you created that feature yourself. And so you just end up with this sort of Frankenstein product, just full of technical debt. Your developers hate it. Every time you talk about doing something to the plugin, you just see a little bit of your developer's soul leave as they know they have to open up that code base one more time. And it's a mess. And then renewal rates start to drop, which means your revenue drops because you're not making new sales anymore, because you're not increasing your sales anymore, because you can't think of any new features to add. And, so then you start having to lay people off because you're not making as much money as you were before. That's not a position I want to be in, I don't want to get to that point where I have to start making hard decisions because I grew too fast, too quickly, and now I have a crap product. If you grow slowly and carefully, you can, and you put more effort and emphasis into maintaining your software and making sure that the code is good, the code is clean, the code is modern. Make sure you're following best practices. If you put an emphasis on that, then you don't have to worry about, because time flies, time flies. All of a sudden, you've been working on this product for 3 years and you didn't realize that you were just slowly adding technical debt to this plugin every sprint, just a little bit more, sprinkling a little bit more tech debt. And it adds up quick. Time flies. And then you find yourself in a sticky situation. And it's really hard to get out of that situation. The longer you go in that direction, the harder it is to get out of that. and I'm not going to name any companies or products, but I've worked on plugins that you try to get some stakeholder buy-in on some refactoring, and they're just like, no, we can't. They'll be like, they'll humor you like, oh, well, what do you think? How long would that take? Like, well, I talked to the senior developer and he thinks that, 4 to 6 months to completely refactor. And then we'd have basically, a brand new squeaky clean plugin, nice and modern, nice and clean. They're like, no, we can't do that. Like, why not? Well, because then that'd be 6 months where we're not adding features. Okay. Are people not buying our product anymore? No, they're still buying it. Then why do we have to add new features? Well, because we want to increase our sales. Of course, we want to make more money. Okay. Well, good luck. Good luck with that. And then again, not naming any names, but I know there are some plugins out there that are sort of the standard in their particular industry, and they're struggling. They're struggling financially. Some of that, sure, it's the market, it's the economy. But I know for a fact that it's not just that. There are other things that can affect your renewals than just the economy. And trying to blame everything on the economy, that's not going to help you. Honestly, it's not going to help you even if you're right, even if it is all the economy's fault, focus on what you can possibly do to overcome it. But anyways, and that wasn't brief. The question was briefly described. So I didn't answer the question with, a 16-minute rant. So that was a non-brief explanation of what I think is important to the process of creating excellent software. The TLDR of it all is I believe a lot of product companies could benefit from focusing more on software maintenance and focusing on scalability and maintainability, and less on new feature. I think a lot of companies could benefit from shifting that balance, because it is a balance. Like I said, you can't completely neglect maintenance or new features. You can't just stop adding new features and never add another feature, especially if your competitors are adding features that people want and you're not. I'm not saying that you got to stop adding new features, but I do believe that most companies, most product owners, most product managers, I think they are balancing it a little bit heavy in the wrong direction. And I think they could benefit from tipping the scales a little bit towards maintenance. So that's it. That's my product owner rant for probably the year. I don't know. Like I said, I don't do this a lot, so maybe this will be the last one. Who knows? Maybe I'll inspire myself and I'll start sharing more random thoughts. But kudos to this company for asking a not stupid question in an application. That was refreshing. I enjoyed that. And thanks for sticking around for this. And I'll catch you guys later.